Hello everybody and welcome to Gene's Reviews from a regular dude here in my car. If you're already subscribed, thank you so much. If you're not yet subscribed, please think about doing so and make sure you tap that bell icon so you can be notified every single time I upload a new video. Also, give me a thumbs up if you don't mind. It helps with the YouTube algorithm. And if you stick around till the end of the video, I have a joke for you. Today we're going to check one out from Most Amazing Top 10. This says Real Witch Trials in History with Disturbing Backstories. Wonder if they're going to talk about Salem. Let's check it out.
In 1692, 19 people in Salem were executed for witchcraft. In addition, one man was pressed to death during questioning, and 5 more died due to the cold, unsanitary conditions in the town jail.
The Salem witch trials in the United States aren't the only case of mass hysteria involving accusations of witchcraft. Far from it, witch trials were happening throughout Europe years before and years after. These are real witch trials in history with disturbing backstories. In September 1710, an old widow in Island McGee, Ireland, began experiencing bizarre, seemingly supernatural events. She'd claim stones would be thrown at her windows, only no one would be outside. Objects would vanish and reappear, and she'd find her bedsheets rearranged into the shape of a corpse. Then she claimed to see a demonic creature that ominously told her that she would die soon. Well, just a few months later, on February 21st of 1711, she died after being hit with intense stabbing pains in her back. The locals immediately suspected witchcraft, especially after a young girl named Mary Dunbar found an apron with the widow's bonnet, and soon after, strange happenings began to plague her as well. Mary started vomiting small objects, pins, buttons, and was said to have levitated above her bed. After weeks of torment, she named 8 local women as the culprits, claiming their spirit images had been visiting her. The town's clergy, led by Edward Clements, took these accusations very seriously and brought these women to court. There was no evidence, mind you, they were just going off of Mary's claims.
Probably wasn't them.
The women were sentenced to a year in prison, and during the trial they were attacked by an angry mob. One of the accused ended up losing an eye. Luckily, they weren't burnt at the stake, but the fact that all someone needed to do was make a statement, with absolutely no evidence whatsoever, and 3 women landed themselves in jail for a year, is incredibly disturbing. Not as disturbing as these following cases, though. The 1612 Northampton witch trials started like so many others. Noble folk accusing common folk, mostly women, of witchcraft. The main accuser was Elizabeth Belcher, who didn't like a young woman named Joanne Brown. Elizabeth started claiming that Joanne had cursed her, and when Elizabeth fell ill, she was sure that this curse had to be real. Her brother William Avery even jumped on the bandwagon, saying he tried to visit Joanne's cottage to lift the curse, but was stopped by some strange invisible barrier. Joanne, her mother Agnes, and 4 others were arrested and sentenced to hang. The odds were stacked against them, as innocent until proven guilty wasn't exactly a thing at the time, especially when it came to accusations of witchcraft. Once you were accused, everyone just assumed you were guilty. Now, the story goes that before the hanging, William Avery was even allowed to enter the woman's cells and physically attack Agnes Brown because it was believed that spilling a witch's blood could lift her curses.
Wow.
The Scottish witch hunt of 1661 to 1662 was one of the deadliest witch hunts in history. It began in small areas around Edinburgh, where over 200 people were accused of witchcraft in just 9 months. This quickly spread across Scotland, and by the end of 1662, at least 660 people had been accused, and some reports say as many as 450 were executed, but that number may have been embellished over the years. Still, though, a lot of people died. Some historians blamed the witch hunt on the end of English rule in Scotland. Before 1660, English judges were more hesitant to prosecute suspected witches, but supposedly once they left, the Scottish authorities cracked down on supposed witchcraft harder. Not sure how I feel about that explanation. I feel like that might be some revisionist history, but church officials also did see the witch trial supposedly as a way to regain influence now that the English were gone again, supposedly. Eventually this died off, though. The witch trial stopped, mostly because non-religious authorities just got tired of the witch panic and finally put their foot down.
I'll bet a lot of them were executed
In
that weren't even guilty.
1969, Tucson,
Probably
Arizona,
more than not.
was home to one of the strangest witch trials in history, mainly because this was 1969, not 1699. Ann Stewart was a teacher at Flowing Wells High School, where a folklore lecturer gave a talk at the school. And he went on to describe witches with traits like blonde hair, blue or green eyes, a widow's peak, a pointy left ear, and a fondness for, quote, devil's green clothing. Coincidentally, Stewart matched this description almost perfectly that day. And the students, of course, started joking around about it, and when one of them asked if she was a witch, Stewart replied, "What do you think?" Now, at first, Stewart had fun with the joke. She even encouraged students to explore astrology and dressed up as a witch for another folklore lesson. It was all just fun and games, but things quickly escalated and rumors started to spread. The school district wasn't amused, and in 1971, they fired her for passing herself off as a witch and, quote, teaching witchcraft. It was insane, and Stewart wasn't backing down. She took her case to court, and fortunately the judge ruled in her favor, ordering the school to reinstate her. Reflecting on the situation years later, Stewart was quoted saying, "I surely would have been burnt at the stake by now if this was 18th century Salem."
Yep.
In the 15th century, the remote Val Camonica region in
They
northern
should make a
Italy
movie
became
about
the target of a brutal
That'd be a
witch
good
hunt.
movie.
People were very isolated here. They didn't really know much about what went on outside of their small village. And in 1455, when an inquisitor visited, he was horrified by what he saw. He accused the locals of, quote, rejecting sacraments, emulating youths, and adoring the devil. It's unclear if these accusations were true, whether people were actually sacrificing their young. Probably not, but the Inquisition decided to step in. From 1505 to 1510, and again from 1518 to 1521, they carried out witch hunts. They forced confessions through torment and executed an estimated 100 people, many of whom were burnt alive as witches.
That'd be a horrible way to
In
go.
1682,
Being burned
three
alive.
women, Temperance Lloyd, Mary Trembles, and Susanna Edwards, were accused of witchcraft and executed. The trial also involved two other women who survived, probably because they were of higher social status. The three who died, though, were poor, unmarried, and lived off charity. They were the type of social outcasts at the time who were prime targets for accusations of witchcraft. Temperance, who'd been abandoned by her husband, sold apples to get by. Well, one day, a young rascal stole an apple and shortly after got sick, and that's when rumors started to spread about Temperance being a witch who poisoned or cursed the apple. And in July of 1682, Thomas Eastchurch accused her after his sister-in-law Grace Thomas fell ill. Eastchurch claimed that Temperance had confessed to witchcraft and had met a mysterious man believed to be the devil who had urged her to harm Grace. Then Mary Trembles and Susanna Edwards were accused after a woman named Grace Barnes blamed them for her own mysterious illness. Both women were accused of using magic to harm people, and the three women were tried together and found guilty. They were hanged on August 25th, 1682. And after their deaths, their bodies were dumped in unconsecrated ground, now part of a car park near the University of Exeter, which actually offers a master's degree in witchcraft now.
Better than being burned
In
alive.
1645, Bury St. Edmunds in Suffolk was the site of England's largest witch trial, where 18 people were hanged. Matthew Hopkins was known as the Witchfinder General, later to be played by Vincent Price in the 1968 historical horror film, Witchfinder General. Anyway, he and his team were responsible for 124 witch trials in Suffolk alone in that year. Most of the accused were poor elderly women, but men and wealthier citizens weren't always always safe either. One of the victims you wouldn't typically associate with witchcraft was an 80-year-old reverend named John Laus. After a violent interrogation, he was convicted and hanged as a witch. So you can only imagine how easy it was for old widowed outcasts to fall to baseless accusations like this.
Yeah.
This was a pretty chaotic time in England. It was right in the middle of the English Civil War, and there had been an official law against witchcraft at the time. So the Witchfinder General, Matthew Hopkins, saw an opportunity to profit off of this, turning witch hunting into a lucrative business. In the 17th century, northern Moravia, now part of the Czech Republic, hundreds of women were burnt at the stake. One of the creepiest cases started when an altar boy saw an old woman pocket her communion bread instead of eating it. When the priest confronted her, she explained that she was going to give it to her cow. The priest wasn't happy about this. In fact, he was highly suspicious of the woman. He suspected her of witchcraft and decided to report her to the local judge. This set off a chain reaction of trials and executions. The judges who made money from sentencing people to death were coincidentally pretty enthusiastic about finding more witches to kill. They gathered accusations from the public and used torment to force confessions. The hunt spiraled out of control, and over 100 people could be executed in one single trial. Eventually, the ruling class in the area started to get worried because the witch panic was spreading and it was getting a little too close to home, so they pressured their government to end the trials, and finally, the witch hunts came to an end.
About time.
The Trier witch trials took place from 1582 to 1594 in Germany. The region had been suffering from years of bad weather and poor harvests, and the public wanted someone to blame, so why not witches? The trials were pushed by a man named Peter Binsfeld, a bishop turned witch hunter. Now, witch hunts typically targeted vulnerable old women, as we've discussed throughout this video, but that wasn't the case here. Here, no one was safe. Even when Trier's deputy governor, Judge Dr. Dietrich Flade, tried to stop all the madness, he was tormented into confessing and was burnt at the stake. Over the course of the trials, at least 368 people were burnt alive. One of the few to escape execution was Cornelius Loos, a scholar who spoke out against the witch trials. He wrote a book protesting them, but the manuscript was seized and Loos was imprisoned. But he managed to get freed in 1593. He moved to Brussels and was then imprisoned once again for his anti-witch hunt stance. In 1612, 12 people from the area around Pendle Hill in Lancashire were accused of witchcraft, and their trials are some of the most infamous in English history. They were charged with the deaths of 10 people supposedly caused by witchcraft. Most of the accused came from two families, Elizabeth Southerns and her daughter Elizabeth Devis, along with their extended family, and Anne Whittle and her daughter Anne Redfern. There were also a few others like Jane Bulcock, Alice Nutter, and Janet Preston. Bulcock and Alice Nutter, that's a funny pair of names to put right together. I am very talented. All right, the allegations were wild. People accused these people of using witchcraft to make people sick or just outright kill them, based on the fact that some of these people practiced traditional healing or fortune telling. And 10 of the accused were found guilty and hanged, and they weren't allowed any defense or witnesses speak on their behalf. So of course they lost. And today in Pendle, you'll find statues dedicated to these women and even a museum on the history of the Lancashire witch trials. With all that said, I've been your host, James. I will catch you.
Some really interesting stuff to me. I think they should, that one with the school teacher, they should make a movie out of that. That's definitely a movie that I'd go and see. Maybe they already have. I don't know. But let me know what you thought of that in the comments down below. Do you think that people can be cursed like that? Do you think it's possible? Let me know. Now it's time for a joke. I was at an AA meeting yesterday celebrating 365 days sober. It only took me 7 years to do it.